Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking beyond kindness. We're going to expose the, kind of dark psychology behind why genuinely nice people consistently get exploited. And more importantly, how to stop that cycle dead in its tracks. Let's get right into it. So why do the kindest people always seem to get hurt the most? It's a total paradox, right? Think about it. From the time we're little kids, we're drilled with the exact same universal lessons. Be nice, help others, compromise, don't make a fuss. But literally nobody warns us about what's actually hiding underneath that lesson. The cognitive dissonance is incredibly frustrating. You do everything right, you help everyone, you literally never say no, you put everybody else's needs first, and yet you aren't rewarded for it. Instead, you're the one left completely drained, while the selfish people, the manipulators, they just seem to skate by just fine. I mean, why is that? Okay, let's dive into this because psychology actually has a clinical name for this behavior. It's called the Fawn Response. If you've spent your entire life just thinking you were, a classic people pleaser, well, know that fawning isn't just some quirky personality trait. It is a deep-seated survival mechanism. It's literally your brain trying to keep you safe by appeasing the people around you and aggressively, and I mean aggressively, pushing your own needs entirely out of the picture. Giving it a name is honestly so validating because it means you aren't alone, and you definitely aren't broken. Your brain is just running a really old script. We've all heard of fight, flight, and freeze, right? Those are your brain's go-to options when faced with, say, an angry bear in the woods. But fawn is the hidden fourth response, and it completely flies under the radar because, on the surface, it just looks like you're being a wonderfully agreeable person. Fawning usually develops in childhood environments where love, affection, or even just basic safety felt entirely conditional. The child quickly learns that affection only comes when they behave a certain way, agree with the adults, or just keep the peace. So to survive, their growing brain essentially learns to bury its own needs, its own anger, and its own basic preferences. That buried childhood strategy eventually solidifies into this core subconscious belief: the absolute safest thing I can do is make other people happy. And then that kid grows up into an adult who apologizes for everything. I mean, constantly. They'll apologize when someone else bumps into them, or honestly, even when they bump into an inanimate object. We've all been there, apologizing to a chair. They struggle immensely to set even basic boundaries, and they instinctively put everyone else's comfort light years ahead of their own well-being. It's a total automatic reflex. But here's exactly where this survival strategy turns incredibly dangerous out in the adult world. Let's look at the manipulator's playbook. You see, narcissists and highly manipulative people, they don't just pick their targets randomly, they profile. Research on manipulation tactics shows they specifically gravitate toward people exhibiting very exact traits, basing self-worth on approval, avoiding conflict at literally all costs, feeling intense guilt at the drop of a hat, and taking on the heavy burden of everyone else's emotions. If you're a chronic fawner, you've probably never learned how to say no. And to a manipulator, you aren't just appealing, you are highly practical. You're basically an incredibly easy target who simply won't push back. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how they spring the trap in the classic abuse cycle. It goes like this. Step 1. Love bombing. It always starts with this overwhelming affection. Finally, someone who truly sees and appreciates your endless giving. But then, step 2. Control. It creeps in, very slowly. And when you finally try to protest or set a tiny boundary, they hit you with step 3, devaluation. They totally flip the script and say things like, wow, I didn't realize you were this selfish. They weaponize your entire identity of being a good person against you to induce instant guilt, forcing you to back down. And this vicious cycle, it can repeat for years across relationships, friendships, and even in the workplace. But what is the actual real-world cost to you when you live like this? The hidden toll is absolutely severe. And it starts with chronic resentment. Look, when you consistently prioritize everyone else, your unexpressed anger doesn't just magically vanish into thin air. It accumulates. Because quote-unquote nice people rarely let themselves express anger outwards, it turns inward. It kind of just rots inside, often showing up as intense physical anxiety, a low-grade depression you just can't shake, or suddenly snapping in these confusing emotional outbursts that totally shock everyone around you and usually shock yourself too. The second hidden toll is the complete and utter loss of your own identity. Think about it for a second. When your entire daily focus is spent scanning the room and desperately managing other people's emotions, you eventually lose touch with your own. You just forget your own preferences, your own opinions, and your own desires. You essentially become a human mirror. You just reflect back whatever the person in front of you wants to see instead of actually knowing who you are or what you genuinely want out of life. And the third toll is really a direct consequence of those first two.
you end up attracting the absolute wrong people over and over again. Emotionally healthy, well-adjusted people are naturally drawn to mutual respect. They want a partner or a friend who actually has a spine and an opinion. But people with poor boundaries unintentionally become massive magnets for those who completely lack respect. You're basically broadcasting a loud signal that says, hey, I have no walls, and the people who love climbing over walls, they come running.
And here is the most heartbreaking part of the whole shebang. When the dust finally settles and the nice person gets hurt all over again, they immediately blame themselves. They think, maybe if I had just done more, they wouldn't have left. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. It is so incredibly painful to watch because you're sitting there taking the blame for someone else's toxic behavior. The truth is much simpler, but I know it's hard to hear. The problem was never your kindness. The problem was the absence of boundaries protecting that kindness. So what does this all mean for us? How do we fix it? How do we rewire decades of subconscious programming? Well, we break the cycle in 4 essential steps. Separate kindness from self-erasure, stop using guilt as a compass, practice voicing your needs, and then watch how people react. Let's break these down one by one. Step 1 is a massive perspective shift. You have to separate kindness from self-erasure. Being a genuinely good person does not mean agreeing to everything someone asks of you. You can genuinely, deeply care about someone and absolutely still say no to them. These two things are not opposites. In fact, they absolutely must coexist in any emotionally healthy relationship. If your version of kindness literally requires you to erase your own needs, guys, it's not kindness anymore. It's self-destruction. Step 2 is vital. You have got to stop using guilt as your moral compass. So the crucial point is this. When you first start setting boundaries and finally saying no, your brain is going to scream that you are being a terrible, awful person, and you will feel incredibly guilty. But listen to me, that feeling does not mean you did something wrong. It literally just means you're building a brand new habit that your nervous system just isn't used to yet. Your nervous system is recalibrating itself. Expect the guilt, acknowledge it's there, and then completely ignore it. Step 3 is to actually practice voicing your needs. And you really have to start small here. Don't try to set some massive life-altering boundary on day 1. Try just saying, I'm not comfortable with that. Or use this fantastic stalling tactic. I need some time before I decide. Say it to a coworker, say it to your barista, say it to a friend. It's exactly like going to the gym. The repetition is the only thing that matters. The more you practice these tiny little moments of friction, the less terrifying and unnatural it feels when you actually need to use them in high-stakes situations. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because once you start speaking up, you reach step 4. This is the ultimate litmus test for the people in your life. Closely watch how they react when you set a boundary. If someone respects your no, even if they're maybe a little disappointed, that is a massive green flag. That is what a healthy relationship looks like. But if they guilt trip you, if they punish you with a silent treatment, or if they just completely disappear, pay close attention, because that reaction tells you absolutely everything you need to know about what that relationship actually was. They didn't love you, they just loved how useful you are. Which brings us to our final thought. Your kindness was never the problem. The only thing left to learn is who deserves it and who doesn't. Being kind was never, ever your weakness. Your only vulnerability was believing that your kindness alone would be enough to keep you safe. Real safety comes from self-respect and having boundaries. The truly strongest people aren't the ones who make absolutely everyone happy. They are the ones who give their kindness intentionally and exclusively to the people who actually value it. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. But before you go, I want you to ask yourself this. If you stopped fawning and start setting boundaries today, who in your life will be the very first to get angry?